All right, so it looks like we are live once again. And I'm Latoya. Thank you all in advance for joining us again on tonight. But I'm waiting for some people to get on here first, and then we're going to start talking. And I'm going to bring the two folks that are with me on today. I'm going to bring them up momentarily. But this is the last night of our April storytelling series. And I thank you for everybody who has joined in along the way because we've heard some really heavy stories as always. We know that April is, in fact, Sexual Assault Awareness, Child Abuse Prevention Month. And I just want to make sure that I was thinking about this today. Like, I don't want to lose sight of how I started the month off. And I wanted everybody to know, and I wanted to be very clear that the importance of sharing story. And I shared my story in a recent podcast. I still want people to go and download and connect with that podcast. It's called It Comes with Living. And on there, I share my story of dealing with childhood sexual abuse. And so I don't want to lose sight of that. I also want to say that even though April is Sexual Assault Child Abuse Prevention Month, this is something that needs to be talked about every day outside of April and all the other months. We need to bring awareness to these issues. So I don't want anybody to think that April is up and now all of a sudden we're just done chatting about it. It means that we've just brought so much awareness to the issue in April, not just us, but hopefully the world, so much awareness to the issues. And we're speaking about prevention that we're going to go forth and continue to do this work and talk real loud and real boldly about these issues for those that are ready to talk and share. And even though this is April and this is the month I'm Strong Witness is intentional about talking about these things, I also want to let you know that if you feel like you're ready to share your story and it's August, don't wait till April to me. You can reach in August, then we're chatting in August. So before we get off tonight, I'm definitely going to be talking about what you can do if you want to share your story in the future with me, because I want to hear from different people. I gotta put my headphones in. I didn't realize they weren't in. I want to hear from different people when it comes to storytelling and sharing. Another point that I want to bring up that I want to make sure that we're saying to everybody is tomorrow, Wednesday, April the 28th, it's called Denim Day. Okay, but I want to explain what Denim Day is. And I did a post about it yesterday. So in 1992 in Italy, a young girl was driving with her driving instructor, right? Like we all kind of did when we were younger, where it was parents or you went and somebody taught you how to drive. And what happened was the instructor led her down a remote road, pulled her out of the car, and he raped her. The case went to trial. He got convicted and he was sentenced. But the way the story goes, well, the way it's facts, right? He got out on an appeal. And why did he get out on the appeal? Because at that time, the court ruled that the young lady had on such tight jeans that there was no way that he can get them off by herself. And so they said, well, if she assisted in any type of way in getting those tight jeans off, then at that point she gave consent. So since that day and what's been going on, so that happened in Italy, but around the world, it's called Denim Day. And with that is you wear jeans to bring awareness to sexual assault, right? To let people know that no matter what you wear or what you have on, it does not mean that you're giving consent to anybody else for any sexual act. So remember, tomorrow's Denim Day. Tell your friends, wear some jeans to work. I don't know if you can wear jeans to work. You may want to ask first. I don't want anybody to get fired over Denim Day. But it is taking a stand over Denim Day. So I'm going to have my jeans on regardless. So, but it's very important. And then last thing before we start talking with our other two guests, if you see, I got my Strong Witness shirt on. I had a few different colors. You know, I got this from a gentleman from my church. He makes these shirts. But if you want a t-shirt, reach out to me because pretty soon we're going to start selling them. But it most likely be in this red with the black writing and the black with, well, this is not red. I have a shirt that's red with black writing and then black with red bone. So, yeah, Michelle says wear a denim jacket if you can't wear jeans. Everybody got some denim. So we want to do that. So the first person that I definitely want to come up and chat with us, her name is Corinne. and she is out of North Carolina. But I do want her to introduce herself. And tonight we're going to spend a good amount of time talking to you about trauma and what trauma is, specifically as it relates to sexual assault, but then in general. So I am going to bring Corinne up. There you go, Corinne. So
Hi.
everybody can see you, but I'm going to give you the space to introduce yourself first and tell the people who you are and then where you're located as well.
Okay. Thank you, Latoya. I appreciate being here tonight, and the fact that you even brought me here means a lot. I'm Corinne Williams. I'm a licensed clinical social worker here in Durham, North Carolina, and graduated from UNC and North Carolina Central and a few other places. And right now I'm in private practice here in Durham, but it's telehealth, so mostly North Carolina, most of North Carolina and Utah as well. Latoya and I have had some interesting conversations about me being licensed in North Carolina and Utah, as if they're remotely connected at all. But I'm very glad to be here. I am uh, also the founder of Mend. I say that reluctantly because I think that the Lord is really the founder of Mend. But Mend is an organization of clinicians of color or BIPOC clinicians, Black, Indigenous people of color, clinicians, meaning therapists of different types, LPCs, licensed clinical social workers, psychiatric nurse practitioners, psychiatrists, psychologists, PhDs, PsyDs. We really cover a host of education and career backgrounds. But we're an international organization of clinicians who we specialize in trauma, and we are. Michelle says she loves Mend. Mend loves you, Michelle. We specialize in trauma, and our goal is to give services away to at least 2 people per year, for a minimum of 5 years per clinician. And so when you think about it, right now we're at, Latoya, if you can believe it, we're at almost 1,500 clinicians right now in Mend. And so we started out, I was really hoping to have 20 people. And by the end of the first night, we had over 300, and now we're at 1,400 people, clinicians who have signed on for this mission. And we are absolutely out to change the world. We really are.
And I think that's amazing. So you want to just listen. If you at first you're like, if I can get 20 people,
20
and
20
now
was going to be amazing. I was like, oh my gosh, think of how many people we can help with 20 people, 20 clinicians.
yeah,
Yeah.
and now you're at 1,400, and that's amazing. I love what you said too. God's really the founder of men, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I hear you saying is, and why not? We could just flow right that way right now. And that's, I feel the same way about Strong Witness, right? Because I know the Holy Spirit dropped Strong Witness for me, because I was going to call it something completely different. And the release that it gave me to even say Strong Witness and the power that's in it. But because Men isn't even a year old yet, right? But tell people, because we're talking about trauma, but let's tell the audience why Mend, and why do you think, why was it started? Why do you think the Lord gave it to you? Like, just because it was around this time last year. So let's pick up in that space.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I could really answer the question about why he gave it to me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm humbled that the idea was given to me. I have plenty of ideas that don't pan out exactly the way that I want them to, but Mend, that's how I know that it wasn't one of my ideas. It started out just after witnessing the murder of George Floyd live on television, and how angry that made me during that time, and just um, being in different audiences and knowing how angry people of color in general were, and not only people of color, but people of many colors, were angry about his murder. And for me personally, I'm not an angry person, and so for me to be feeling the way that I felt, it felt very uncomfortable, but I was okay with that discomfort. I think that there are times when we should be uncomfortable with wrong things. It's called a righteous indignation. When we just feel uncomfortable with injustice. And so I prayed to God and I said, I don't know what to do with this. I have no idea um, where to go with this anger that I feel, and it was very, very prevalent for a while for me. And after I prayed that prayer and told God, well, you've got to do something with this because I don't know what to do. Um, After I prayed that prayer, the very next day, it came to me that, what is it about this that really bothers me? Yes, it bothers me that a child now no longer will have her father. It bothers me that this man um, was obviously someone who had already been traumatized and then was re traumatized. And then the source of his anxiety was confirmed when he was murdered. That was what he was fearing. And so the thing that he was fearing was the thing that came true. And for Black men and women to watch this, already knowing in our minds, I could go back to 1,000 stories of other men who were murdered um, at the hands of either police or just vigilantes, people who thought that they were in the right, who were standing up for their rights, and ended up, murdering people of color. And so anyway, I thought of that and thought that the trauma itself was the part, and the re-traumatization is the part that really bothered me. And I decided that I wanted to become a trauma expert. So this is my corner. This is the part that really sticks with me, is the trauma. And so I wanted to become a trauma therapist, specializing in trauma, so that I could then begin to help people overcome the trauma, and then I could be a part of the solution and not just another angry person. Um, and so. Uh, when I ended up, I belonged to a group called the Clinicians of Color Group on Facebook. And in this group, there's just a vibrant community of clinicians of color who just vibe on many different wavelengths. And I posted this idea, and it started with something like, I've got a crazy idea. And I was really, really hoping, like Latoya said, to get about 20 people who could join me, because I'm thinking, if I become trained in a treatment modality that I know can heal people from trauma, and I give that to 2 people every year for free for the rest of my career, in addition to all the people that I help not for free, um, that impacts their children, that impacts their community, that impacts their relationships with their significant others, that impacts their relationships at work. And so by helping one person, I am helping a whole community. And so by the time I get done doing that twice a year, every year for the next 80 years or so, however long I plan to keep working, I could help a lot of people. And so I was thinking, if we can multiply this by 20 people, we could really, really change a community, an entire community. And so I made this post, and within 3 hours, we had, again, over 300 people. And today, as we stand, we are about 1,400 strong, international, covering all 7 regions of the United States, and several countries abroad as well. So that is the story of how God brought men to be. And there are many intricacies in there, different conversations in different groups about how those things all came together. But I think that that's enough to give you guys the chill that I have when I think about what God has done so far.
Yeah, and that's thank you for sharing that. And that's awesome, because I remember the original post in the Clinicians of Color group. Yeah, I remember that. I remember jumping on it. And I love that. I also love, and you can see, Corinne, too, I'm putting up different comments that people are sharing. I know you're talking, you probably won't be able to see everything, but just praises for men, or like my pastor shared. Thank you for having a real heart and helping God's people. And this is something I remember you saying to me before in the fall. You wanted to be a part of the solution and not just another angry person, right? So, and that's, I mean, we can all, say, listen, we've been bothered by something, and we can say, I'm going to be stuck here in this anger, or I'm going to do something about it. Like, or we can take it back to the playgrounds, don't talk about it, be about it. You know what I mean? Or when you get into rough discussions. But what you chose to do was saying, and we all were, most people with a heart and some empathy, let me correct that, were devastated by the murder of George Floyd nearly a year ago, right? Last year, nearly a year ago. And people reacted differently. And what you said, I'm going to do something with trauma. I'm going to help clinicians of color to learn about trauma as well. And then we're going to go forth. If I just get 20, and then if I did quick math, I don't know it, but you went from 20 to 1,400, right? So God definitely added to that. And now you said in different countries, that's the part that got me. I hope everybody caught that. It's in countries. But let's talk about what trauma is, because that's like, we can look at that as racial trauma, not look at it as, it's what it is. But even when it comes to sexual assault, childhood sexual abuse, let's talk about what trauma is for those that don't know. Just in general, the details of what trauma is.
Right. And so when I think about trauma, there are different types of trauma. And one of the things that makes trauma difficult, especially things like racial trauma and sexual trauma, is that we have a tendency to normalize what some things that are traumatic. So I'll give you, and I've pulled up a few examples here of what we call big T traumas. And so major events can be, catastrophic events. Trauma could be being in a hurricane, being in a war zone, watching someone die, watching someone be very, very ill can be traumatic. Having a major surgery could be traumatic. Being in a serious car accident. These are big T traumas. And things like repetitive experiences can also be traumatic. So abuse, neglect, in anything that we typically think of, PTSD unfortunately has become one of these, just a common phrase that we use without a lot of thought behind it. But typically the things that we associate with PTSD, those things are what we call big T traumas. Okay. And then there are the smaller things, and these are the things that we have a tendency to normalize, that are still traumas, but we don't think of them necessarily as traumas. And so you may hear some of these things and say, wow, I have a trauma that I didn't even really realize was a trauma. So for instance, having an overwhelming feeling that constantly takes over your mind, being bullied at school. I think a small T trauma, depending on the level of what you witness, can be watching someone else go through something. So almost like a secondary trauma. And we sometimes call these things complex traumas because a lot of times they have many different moving parts to it. Some people were traumatized, for instance, being in a church environment, and they saw things and witnessed things that scarred them. Or being in a household where your mom yelled all the time. Small T trauma. She didn't slap you across the face with a broom, no, but there were scars internally that you have a hard time getting rid of or coping with as an adult. So all of these things are things that permanently, well, I say permanently, but not really. There is healing out there, and that's what we're aiming to do, is to heal people from these traumas. But they have a way of changing the way that you interact with the world that you live in.
And I'm glad that you said that, like the big T trauma, the little T trauma. And I'm wondering, and everybody, for everybody that's listening, I don't, you don't need to put it in the comments, but if you want to, you can, if you feel safe enough to do that. But would it be fair to say, Corinne, that most people have been traumatized in some type of way,
In some
whether we
way.
realize it or not?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Everybody, I believe. I have not yet, let me put it this way, I have not yet met a person who has not been through some form of trauma in their lifetime.
Yeah. And it's what we qualify as trauma, the big T, the little t, but it's still traumatic. And one thing, I share with people, even when it comes to issues of childhood abuse or sexual assault, even when I was younger and dealing with my own stuff, I would minimize it because I would, okay, well, it wasn't rape, so it wasn't that bad, or reflecting back over the month. I know Tania's on here too, and we're going to bring her into discussion in a little bit, but we've had people share these last couple weeks. If everybody remembers Ruth a couple weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, remember she talked about being abused as a child from the ages of 11 to 17. Traumatic. The two gentlemen that came on last week, they talked about a one-time incident. Traumatic. It's heavy, but just tell people too, like, trauma can be seconds and it could be years. Is that right?
Absolutely. It could be something and it could even be something that's seconds, but repeats over time. And we sometimes end up looking for that trauma, and so we re-traumatize ourselves. A person who grew up in a household where there was lots of fighting may say to themselves, I never want to live in a household where there's this much fighting. But then they end up seeing themselves in relationships where there is a lot of fighting. And so we kind of almost attract this energy back into our lives of the very thing that we never wanted. And it is a cycle that we get into with trauma, is almost re-attracting the thing that we were afraid of.
Explain more of that. Like, what do you mean re-attract? And why is it that do you think people are, re-attracting? That's a good point.
I think that it's human nature to be comfortable with what we're familiar with. Now, familiar doesn't mean that it's friendly. Familiar means familiar. And so familiar can be, well, I don't want a man who is a softie. I'm used to a guy who's can talk smack to me. You know what I'm saying? Or I'm used to someone who is I'm used to being called not smart. I'm used to being called stupid. And so that is what I recognize. Do I like it? No. But that is what I recognize. And so when you start to identify relationships based on what you recognize, you connect with the things that you have seen already.
Yeah. And that's what I like that too. I saw Shauna said she likes that comment on Facebook, so I had to put it up there. We're gonna be using that one in sessions going forward. I think I know I am, Shauna. Maybe you too. Yeah, I'll say. I heard somebody say it once. I gotta say it first. I heard you say it before I start using it. but I like that. So familiar doesn't mean friendly. But a lot of times, what we do is we normalize this trauma to the point where it's just our everyday life. But we don't call it trauma anymore, or we don't know to call it traumatic. But I know you're helping a lot of people now with the understanding that, yeah, there's big things that are traumatic, but there's also things that the world doesn't know and just I know, and that was my experience, but it's still just as traumatic.
Yes.
Right.
And
now,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
And I just want to talk about too, the same way because we're still on this topic of, we're talking about trauma overall, but we're still talking about abuse and sexual assault. Everybody doesn't have the same reaction to traumatic events. Okay, let's talk some about that, because sometimes we may begin to react years afterwards. And for some people, it's then. Or some people, we could both go into an event that's traumatic, and it may not affect me like it affects you.
Absolutely.
Right? So let's share about that, please.
Yeah. So I give my clients this advice a lot of times, because they will many times bring up something that to me automatically when I hear it, I'm like, wow, that's a trauma, and they just gloss right over it. And so when I come back to it with them, they're saying, well, yeah, but it wasn't that bad.
Mhm.
So I was they'll say, so I was someone exposed themselves to me when I was 4, but it wasn't that bad. It's not like I was raped. It's not
Mhm.
like it's not like he touched me, or and the thing that I tell people is that just because somebody else has that experience, and as horrible as that is, that could be a 700-pound weight on their shoulders.
Mhm.
But the fact that they are carrying 700 pounds doesn't make your 350 any lighter on you.
That's good.
Your weight is your weight. The thing that you are carrying is yours. And you don't have to compare your trauma to somebody else's to see how bad it really was.
Mhm.
If it created a scar on you emotionally, then that was a trauma.
Mhm.
And I think that that is, and especially for, unfortunately, in Black and Brown communities, one of the things that we do tend to, well, two things that we normalize a lot: sexual abuse, child abuse. Two things that we normalize.
And why do you
It
think that
is,
is?
well, I think that Black people were brought to this country and had to, were abused in order to comply. That was how compliance was gained, was through abuse. And if I, as a person of color raising a child, and I know that that child could someday have to deal with abuse from a master, then I am going to do everything in my power to protect you from that larger consequence,
Mhm.
right? And so we end up adopting these habits and adopting these forms of punishment that are really abuses, and we're no longer looking at it as abuse, but we're looking at it as an attempt to teach a lesson or to prevent more dire consequences. And I
Mhm.
think that that for Black people is where it started. Being, you'd rather be whipped by your mama than your master. So,
Wow.
um, so you know, it's either I whip him now or he's gonna get whipped later. And we're still whipping. We're still whipping. It's still something that we do. Um, and I think that it's a habit that we've gotten into. I think it's something that we have turned into a culture that is not necessarily something that's been healthy for us. Now, discipline, yes, I believe in discipline. I've got 4 kids of my own, but discipline I believe in. But abuse, we have to start recognizing as abuse.
Mhm. Mhm. And I'm glad that you said that. Even Shauna said you dropping some gems, and she picking them all up. I'm getting some too, Shauna. Just I think we all getting them, right? You're saying a lot of powerful stuff. Even the idea that trauma, there. Listen, that weight is 700, but this is 350. But this is still heavy to me, and so
Hmm.
I have something to deal with. And then the idea, kind of like was just mentioned, we normalize this abuse, but we have to start recognizing it and calling things out as they are. I think another part of the problem, you already said this, a little bit ago, is that people don't realize that they've been traumatized. We think this is so normal that we don't realize that we've been traumatized and we're handing this down generation to generation, especially when it comes to issues of abuse. I've heard women say before, well, as a child's abuse, well, I was abused and my mom too. So, and
Hmm.
it's kind of like, well, this is just like almost like it's a rite of passage. This
Right.
is what happens.
Right.
Let's just keep it moving and be quiet. And that's not the case. That's a lot
Hmm.
of the awareness that we're bringing and the purpose of speaking up when it comes to April, intentionally in the month of April, of talking about things, but bringing awareness to these issues. And if there's
Right.
any point that I want to drive home a couple, but any point that I really drive home is I want people to understand that what trauma is when we end tonight, but then also that it affects people different. And so we have to stop saying things too, that if somebody was violated, well, she looks fine, they're acting fine, like the
Hmm.
next day, right? Like that's not, again, I can talk about my story because it's mine, right? And that's what I can do. But if you would have, the incident occurred in 7th grade, but I didn't start talking about it to 12th grade. And what I say in that podcast too, as I mentioned, the one, It Comes with Living, is almost like, the volume went down. I think I said in the podcast, it's like you're in a theater, like you see the actors on stage, and it's like fade to black. It was like a silent space, but it was in the back of my mind. But if somebody would have came around and said, well, you've been acting normal, so it obviously didn't happen. That's not true. Because you can be traumatized and you can tuck it away.
Absolutely.
And some people are traumatized and then they just shut down. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. And we learn as Black people to tuck it away because you have other things that you have to take care of. You have to focus in school because you have to get a scholarship because your parents can't afford to send you to school. Or I have to tuck this away because I know I can't go to my job and act the way that I feel. So I need to tuck this away. We do that. Black people are professional tuckers.
Yeah, that's good.
We are professional tuckers. We do what we can to make it through the day. And Black women, I think, have shouldered a lot of that for many generations, doing what is necessary, getting through the moment so that we can get through the day. And I think that is another part that has become an unfortunate part of our culture, that we're so strong. I'm a strong Black woman. We're so strong that we hide ourselves.
And that goes along with too, even, I don't know if Michelle's still on here. She may have had a client too, but even, we talk a lot, Corinne, about the Superwoman complex too. There's this idea that I got to keep going and I can't seem like I'm going to break in any cost because this is, I have to flow like this. Again, carrying these burdens and these weights. I'm going to bring Tania on in a moment. And I see a comment from Pastor I'm going to put up here in a second, but I want you to think about, and I kind of read her first couple sentences and I can get it. If anybody else, I want everybody who's on, if you watch it at a later time, to reflect back on the stories that we've been told in here, Strong Witness, the stories that were shared with us. If you have some questions about trauma, what has impacted you the most over these last couple of weeks during this storytelling, the sessions that we've been having on this topic. But this is your space too to get questions answered about trauma if you need some understanding with it. But Tania, I'm gonna bring you up in one moment. Pastor Hicks says, my stepfather didn't touch me, but I suffered the stigma of sexual abuse and looked upon as a fast, tall girl if you would repeat it by family in front of strangers through my teen years. Fast tail girl, excuse me, not tall. It brought shame until I understood it was not my fault. Yeah. So what she's saying, it goes along with what you're saying, Corinne, it's like, it's that goes with the idea of trauma. Maybe it wasn't physical touch, so we can't minimize it, right? Because it was just as impactful to her as anybody else's. So again, we're not comparing trauma at all. But what she's saying is, listen, I learned to realize that even the people speaking about it, right? Or even the people looking upon her as if it had occurred, that rested on her shoulders until she got old enough to realize, listen, that wasn't my fault at all.
Absolutely. And I wonder if I were in a session with Mrs. Hicks, I would say, how did you realize it? Pastor Hicks? Pastor Hicks. I would say, how did you realize it? Because a lot of times people don't wake up from their trauma. Some people die in their trauma. Some people die in their trauma. They never realize that it was a trauma. They may feel like life was unfair. They may feel like, oh, that was wrong, but they never categorize it as, this was not my fault. This was an injury that happened to me.
And you know what? I'm glad you said that too, because that's a lot of why I even want to do Strong Witness, because I realize the power of our words and where we're going. And I've had loved ones that I don't know, they never told me, but I would have to be blind not to see that they died in some part of pain because they wouldn't speak their truth out. So that's powerful what you just said. People die with trauma, and I thank God that I'm not carrying that secret on any longer, and I don't want anybody else to have to. And that's why we're, again, intentional about speaking these words out loud, and that's why Men exist to help people with trauma in different areas. But I just want to make sure people know that that's where that word comes from. You don't have to carry that weight any longer.
Right. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And then Tania too. Again, if you guys have any comments, again, I really want to hear your thoughts. If you would like to share them in the comments, even the last couple weeks, the stories that you heard, the ones that resonated with you the most, why you connected the most with it. And then also, if any questions about trauma, this is a space you can ask about trauma, and you don't have to pay for therapy. This is not therapy. Let me put that banner. I'm going to put that banner up in 2 seconds. Let me remind people, this is not therapy, but I do want you to ask these questions. You don't have to pay for it. There's no co-pays or nothing. This is your space. All right, Tania, you got something to share about this topic or the last few weeks, or I can let you kind of jump in.
Yeah, I didn't even know where to start, to be honest with you. I was listening to, I can't remember her name. I just forgot. It blanked me.
Corinne.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Speak, and thinking about what Pastor D just put in the messages around, her stepfather, and just thinking about just the power of our words and our actions on people. With sexual abuse, you don't have to ever touch anybody for it to be trauma or to traumatize somebody. You don't have to ever put your hands on somebody for them to feel threatened and to for them to experience that trauma response. And I don't know, over the last month and listening to all of these stories, I was just thinking so much about, just as people of color, as a Black woman, as a mother to Black little boys, just thinking about the things that we have to prepare them for every day, just to go into the world, to go into kindergarten, preparing their minds for the trauma that we know that they're going to endure. Like, that's traumatizing to me, like just that experience in and of itself. And that's not counting the things that come up on a daily basis that I have to just deal with. So I really think it's important that we recognize that there's the trauma, like we were talking about, like the big T's and then the little T traumas, but then there's also just that pervasive trauma that could be part of our culture, that I think we need to kind of recognize and be able to talk about these things regularly and normalize the talking about them, so that those big T traumas there could be more stigma around those actions versus how we feel afterwards when they happen to us.
Yeah. And I think that's important to be able to normalize, like you're saying, the trauma. And that's what Corinne was saying as well. Just the space where we can talk about and engage different things and bring it up to the point where it's not taboo and it's not this stigma and it's not awkward. But like we were saying last week, look, how about we make this barbershop talk? How about we can go in there and begin to chat about these things amongst men and normalize talking about pain points the way we normalize talking about the game that was on the day before, right? Hold on.
And says, when you asked her why do we carry some of these things into our culture? And she talked about slavery. I think talking about the trauma is important, but then also talking about the whys. Where do these things come from? Where do they start? It's really powerful, because I think knowledge is power. It really will kind of unpack our freedom. If we can really kind of understand, like, where does the silencing come from? When did we start learning that in order to stay safe, we have to be silent or we have to carry the weight of everything? Where did we learn that and why? I think it's important to kind of unpack that. And in these conversations, they've been powerful. Just listening to other people talk and share their stories. Sometimes, to be honest, it's triggered me. And I've thought, like, oh my goodness, there's this thing that I had in this box thinking it was addressed, and it's not. And this is something that I need to really process and unpack. And sometimes it doesn't really come up until we hear it from other people.
Yeah. That's a really good point. The idea that, again, this is the power of story. It unlocks, not only if we think about, imagination, but also unlocks things that we had buried, right? But still carrying, that we don't know how to speak. And that's what I've heard a lot over this month is when I heard that person say that, it reminded me, or now it awakened something in me. Now let me see what this is about. Now I'm curious and I want to explore this. And a lot of times we just don't know how to do without story, you know, or what Pastor said here again, you know, realizing that I'm missing out on life when I carry this secret around. I don't speak my truth. You know, or Corinne said earlier, just the idea that, listen, I can be angry about it. I can be bitter. I can start to act out and not dislike people. I can start, we talked about this 2 weeks ago, right? I can embrace unhealthy coping skills, whether it be the drinking or the drugs or promiscuity, or I can begin to talk about my truth and then get some help. And so for people listening right now, for people listening on the replay when they catch it later, you know, I want them to understand trauma. And like you were saying, Corinne, a lot of things, I think you said it too, a lot of things we don't know to call it trauma. We just think that thing over there happened, or we don't know what to label it as. We just say that's that. But it has some type of effect on us. And when I think about it, it raises these emotions that I don't know what to deal with. What do we say to that person that hears these stories, or like I just said there, raises these emotions that we don't know what to deal with? What can we say to that person of how to manage of what we can say may be traumatic? How do they cope even in these moments right here? Either one, you can answer that. Corinne, I don't know if you want to answer.
So coping with trauma, I think first requires that we recognize trauma, and it starts with a courageous conversation generally. Sometimes it's a courageous conversation that, because like I said, you don't realize, Tania was saying some of the stuff it didn't even come back up until I heard someone else saying it. And so sometimes it takes things building up to a point where you've had enough and you say, okay, I can't live this way anymore. How do we mend after that? Hopefully, by one of the first things that you've got to build for yourself is a supportive community. So that supportive community can be what I call, I say, look at your life as a stage play. You're the only one on the stage. Who are the people that you have backstage who are making all of the stuff happen for you? A lot of us, spirituality plays a part in who's backstage. And so for me, God is backstage. God is the one who's making the sun rise and fall. He's the one who's doing all the props. He's the one who is creating the narrative while I'm living the story. In my front row, for a lot of people, the front row is people who you trust most, people who know the backstory, who are there to encourage you, people who aren't that you don't have to question what their reaction is going to be when you share something with them. It's predictable. Their support is consistent and predictable for you. Your second row, probably still very supportive people, not as close as the first row, right? You have your people on the balcony who are kind of like the people who are just cheering you on. They are always there. You may not share every single thing with them, but they are a source of support and love and affirmation for you. And then there are a lot of people who are just in the parking lot. They cannot come in. And it's important for you to use your discretion in figuring out where the people in your life, where do they sit? In building your support system, you want to make sure that anybody that you trust with something is somebody who can handle that kind of trust. Because it only takes, and then realizing also, if you are in someone else's front row, please don't act as if they've put you in the parking lot, because you could be the person that shuts them down from ever receiving the help and support that they need. So if somebody has really entrusted something to you, be the community that you want to have. If you want to have a community that is loving and kind and supportive and non-judgmental, right? Then be that community for someone else. And then I would also just add in to always there are support people that we have to branch out of, not just our friends and our family, but maybe there's a pastor or a pastor's wife, or if you feel like you've been through something that you just cannot get through, um, adding in a professional support person. A professional support person can temporarily be on your front row. And don't be ashamed to move people around and seat them where they need to be in your life. Somebody who is in your front row, but you realize you probably don't need to tell them everything, but you still love them like a brother, put them in the balcony and carry on. People don't have to stay where they start in your life. And I just think that is one of the first places that I would say is it starts with a courageous conversation with the supportive people in your life, and then move that forward to a courageous conversation with a professional.
I love that. I love that imagery of the theater with God being the one, backstage, but really, but guiding and leading this and all that stuff. I love the idea of the front row, the balcony, but especially those who are outside and cannot come in. And one thing too, like what you said, you mentioned that some people are in the front row, they got to get moved, but front row people need to take your seat seriously. Like if I have you in the front row, what my pastor mentioned here is that her husband, who she's, I think, at the time she says it was her boyfriend at 15, she told that story too, but he's been in the front row since. And he's been a supporter and an advocate, right? And he remains in the front row. Whereas some people, we've been saying this week to week, if everybody remembers, right? The importance of being, the importance of the first person you tell. And knowing that when you share your story, especially on any issue, but especially around this issue we're talking about, the importance of just listening and not trying to have the magic words or to remember what Corinne said and use it all inappropriate, just because she said it, but to be a good listener. But understand that if you can't hold the position of the front row, it's best to move out of the way than to do more harm than good and sit there and take up somebody else's spot of support. But what I also heard Corinne say that I think was powerful is this idea of community. And if we're all in the auditorium and we care, and I may be in the back, but I'm still rooting for you. But in somebody else's auditorium, I may be front row center. And I may have more of a space, right? And so a great takeaway from tonight, which I hope is going to be a few for some people, is understanding too that we all have this theater. And if I'm on stage and I'm talking about my trauma, if I'm sharing my story, think about the people in your life, like Corinne was saying, and see where to position people. Wait, Casey said, just to clarify, what was the balcony, because it seems high, like high and they're lifted up, Casey, or high like it for people who have
fear of falling.
Yeah. What do you mean by high there? Like that it's a good space? I'm thinking she means
it seems like they're esteemed, like the
okay.
people who are, and I'm just guessing, Casey, so you please chime in and tell me if I'm wrong. But if you're, the reason why the balcony is just people kind of cheering on. If you've ever really been in a theater, that if you really want to see what's happening on stage, you got to sit front row. Now the balcony is good, but people always point to the balcony when they want to hear somebody screaming and really giving them rallying up the crowd, because people on the balcony tend to be a little funny crazy, right? And we love the people on the balcony, but they don't always know every single detail of what's going on. Mm-hmm. And there are some people in your front row who aren't going to rally, who aren't going to be loud and boisterous, but they know the details and they can support you. They can handle the details. Everybody who's in the balcony cannot handle all of the details. And it's important that you make strategic decisions about who you share what with, because you don't want to shut yourself out of receiving the help and the love and support that you need because you trusted the wrong thing with the wrong person.
Mm-hmm. That's powerful. She said this.
It's the cheap seats.
Well, yeah. Yeah. That about sums that up. Yeah. She said she in the balcony in the front row. Right. Okay. Yeah. So I love that. I love that that theater explanation. Let's see here. Just getting some comments from people. Yeah. Yeah.
Something I wanted to add to what Corinne was saying is, everybody's auditorium looks different, right? Sometimes, depending on the type of background you come from, you might have to start from scratch. There a lot of you might have to find a different theater to go into, so that you can get the healing that you really need. Because I just think about my life and a lot of the things that I've been through, and the people that are around me weren't safe. And in order for me to get safe, I had to move and kind of establish new relationships and new friendships, and get healing by starting to establish different friendships and sharing what was going on with me, and learning healthier ways. But it can't always happen in the exact space that you're in.
That's a good point, right? Finding the theater, or finding the scene, finding the people, removing yourself, because maybe you know what, this whole crowd, this whole setup ain't for me. I'm gonna go next door to theater B, you know what I mean, and I'm gonna see who's gonna come in, and we're gonna go from there, right? And I think Pastor makes another great point, just the idea that always believe that you could be completely healed from sexual abuse. With God, all things are possible. And everybody heals in their own way. And I shared this before. I think we even, Pastor was doing a Facebook Live last week, and I mentioned that too. And this, you know what? Then I'm gonna put that in there, Corinne and Tania, what you're sharing about this theater, because at one point, through years of dealing with my trauma, I had different people in my theater, and I had people in the front row that didn't need to be in the front row. Now I'm thinking you're rooting for me, but you don't know how to help me, but you're the ones that I'm looking to. Right. But it wasn't until I moved to Texas and I began to talk to Pastor Hicks about what happened. And she gave me the key. God used her to give me the keys to work through this situation where I'm not carrying that burden like I was carrying it before. You know what I mean? So that goes with Tania's point. Like, listen, this ain't the theater. I had to usher people out. Some people stayed. Some people were rooting. I still believe the people that were rooting years ago were still rooting. And some people ain't made it in yet. Not because I don't want them there. They don't know how to enter in and deal with trauma like I do. And so it's probably best that you stay outside anyway. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's another point I want to add to it, that some people just can't handle our trauma. You know, and it doesn't, in our situation, it's not healthy. So you stay outside, but you don't mean me harm. You just can't help me. So you definitely got to get off my front row. Like, and you're not on the balcony. You just got to wait outside and around the red rope on the other side of the rope. Don't touch the rope.
You don't have to stand back a little bit. You ain't got no ticket. I like
so you don't have a ticket. Basically, you don't have a ticket. Yeah. So I love that. And now I hope everybody gets that, you know, what you're taking away tonight. One of them is our theater. Who's there? And I want you to think about too, since we're talking about storytelling, just even thinking for yourself, what story would you share if you were on stage? If you know that God was behind you, if God is pushing you. Pastor just reminded us that all things are possible through God, right? All things are possible. We don't have to stay stuck in our healing. What story would you share on that stage? And who would be in your front row? Who would be in your balcony? Who doesn't have a ticket? You know, I want you all to think about that on your way to your healing. Right. Sometimes they can't handle it because they haven't dealt with their own trauma. They don't admit the trauma it's caused you, or that they're just flat out wrong. Right. It's a good point.
Good point, Sonia. Very good.
Yeah. But I want everybody to think about, remember, this is the last night of our April storytelling series. It doesn't mean that we're done talking about sexual assault or child abuse. It means that in April we're intentional about talking about these things, and we'll keep doing that. And then is that a real is that a play for real, or is that the one you're gonna write? Is that your screenplay, or is that a real play? Because that would be dope if somebody wrote a screenplay from this. That'd be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It would be.
The theater. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So hold on a second. So what we'll do, I gotta put you on because Tania, the sound that it comes back. I just gotta put you on mute when you're not talking. Yeah. So I want you all to think about a couple things. Remember, tomorrow we talked about Denim Day, as Michelle told us. Listen, you can wear you can wear jeans. You can wear denim. I don't care. I don't care if you got some denim shoes. I don't know what you got, but make sure you put that denim on tomorrow and understand that whatever you wear does not give consent. Also remember that if you have a story you want to share, period, or you know somebody who wants to share their story, to talk about what they've overcame, what they're going through on any topic. Because see, now when we transition to different dates and different times, and we're going to have different stories that come up. I've heard people tell me after last week and the way those men were strong witnesses themselves and came and shared, I heard people come tell me you need to have more men on, and men talk about different things. Talk about rejection, talk about attempts to take lives of suicide. I'm thinking of one specific person that said that he would be willing to come on. So if you have an idea, like not an idea, a topic that you want a story to be on, I want you to reach out to me and let me know. You can message me, you can email me, you can call me, however you know to get in touch with me. Put it in the comments under here, and then we're going to get, if it's not you, then somebody else. If you want to hear a story in an area and you need some help in that area and you want to hear somebody else talk about how they coped, put that in the comments as well. But I think it's important. I want everybody, I thank you all so much for being a part of this, even those who are going to watch on the replay, for Corinne and for Tania as well. Just reminded, I really appreciate the both of you. So I have something that I wanted to say. I went completely blank, but I'm going to give you guys space to just say, you know, who you are again, how they can find you. Tania, I know you're going to be back on many times. Corinne as well, if you just want to chat about MEND just for a second.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'll give you space.
So you can find MEND at www.mendminds.org.
Mm-hmm.
They were on denim to get into church. So you can find MEND at MEND Minds. MEND is MEND as in dog, minds.org. Or you can find my psychotherapy practice is thehopewellamerica.com. We can't hear you.
Hear me. I'm sorry. I'm thinking I'm unmuting you the whole time. I'm sorry. I didn't know you couldn't hear me. My fault, Tania.
Okay.
Did you want to share anything? You got to unmute yourself.
Okay. Good. Okay.
Yeah, you're good. Sorry about that.
Okay, great. So if anybody is interested in coaching or consultation, you can go on our website at psychegroup.org. And hopefully I'll be on here at some other time talking with you all and LaToya on some other subjects.
And thank you, Corinne and Tania, just for joining us. Remember what this month is, but just because the month is over doesn't mean that you stop talking about the issues, okay? Like Corinne mentioned, we're still talking about trauma, understanding what trauma is. Don't normalize these things. Don't pack things up and throw them away. Understanding that the big T, the little T, right? Trauma is trauma. Just because it isn't huge, like somebody else may blow up, doesn't mean that it's not traumatic. I want you to remember what Corinne said as well about the theater. and to see who's in your theater. But I want you to remember Strong Witness and the power of storytelling. I want you to meet us here. And I'm still praying on it. I don't know if it's going to be every Tuesday, every other Tuesday, but I do know I have a gentleman that's ready to share a story, and I don't want to delay that one. So I definitely want to give him this space to talk. And I want everybody to know about a Strong Witness community. And I want you all to continue to be a part of the community. You know, as front row. Oh, I'm still in this, Corinne. You may be somebody's balcony. I'm going to hit them everybody in the session tomorrow. It could be off topic. But what about your theater? That's going to be my line. Everybody get it tomorrow. But
that needs to be a t-shirt.
But also one more thing too. I want to also call this space storytelling sessions. And I'm going to say this real quick before we jump off. I was listening to a podcast. I don't know if everybody knows about the Roots. It's a older band, but sometimes the music bands will have these sessions and they'll go in there and play, right? Or they'll go in there and they sing, and different people will enter in and out of a space, and people will kind of like just sing or do whatever it is, but it's a session and it's a flow. And I want to have this space where I want to have this space where people know to enter in and out, where they can flow in session, right? That even though if I'm here and I'm sharing a story, Pastor says she's preaching about the balcony on Sunday, we're going to be in there, Pastor, right? So, and if we in there, y'all silly. If we're in there and I'm flowing on the story and it resonates, it connects with you emotionally, you know, you can always reach out to me in these comments and I'll bring you in and you start sharing your story. That's how I want to begin to flow in these storytelling sessions. So it's not just about the people that are up here. Now, we're not going to cut anybody's story off because you got something to say. That's different. When that person is done sharing their story and you have something that you want to add value or you want to bring your voice and you want to share, then you jump in the session and you share as well. Okay, because that's what this community is about. Okay, so we know how to find Corinne. And both these guys are in North Carolina. How far are you guys from, like 30 minutes from each other?
Probably less than.
Yeah, probably less.
Yeah. There you go. Thank you so much, Corinne. Hey, don't forget about the t-shirts. Corinne's got a t-shirt in the mail. Tania just won't go get hers. It's located somewhere. I had the wrong address. I'll admit it.
Right. Tell the truth.
But it has been there for about 3 weeks, but she still won't go get it.
You keep it up, you're going to be in the parking lot. Tania's
and all the way out in Henderson area. You know where that area is. That's far.
But see, Shauna using it tomorrow too in session. Shauna will be talking about the theater. Everybody run this theater. So it's good stuff. You do need to make some men theater shirts. But thank you all so much. Remember to share your stories and look out for future storytelling sessions because we're going to be back and we're going to be talking about a whole lot. All right. You all have a blessed night and we'll chat with you soon.
Thank you guys.